Hi, I'm Chris. Today we're going to build the proper tinder bundle. Let's do this real quick. When walking in the woods, you always want to be thinking about what type of tinder you could be collecting along the way, just in case anything did happen. Or if you're in the woods practicing your fire skills, definitely look out for this type of tinder. You want to look for dry, fluffy stuff. Anywhere from tree bark. Behind it you can usually find something dry to help you get your fire going. Birch bark has oils in it that'll ignite like crazy. To cattails, which is like gasoline in nature, to anything else that's nice and fluffy. Think about what would a bird use to build its nest. You want to go for like dried grass, dried weeds, fluffy stuff, even down to pine resin. This will help keep your fire going. If you can find a dried grass, you want to break up the fibers a little bit. Anything to create more surface area. You always want to break this stuff down further. With something like that, if you added the cattail fluff, the fluff from this weed, or even the tops of the dried grass itself, it will ignite. Something like this will catch a spark very easily. You may have to blow it to ignite it if using like a char cloth or an ember, but it'll definitely catch it. It will light, and once this lights, then you can go ahead and add your wood shavings. You could add a piece of birch bark that'll burn. You can add your pine resin that'll burn a little bit longer to get the fire going. What you're looking for is this type of stuff with the bark. Papery type of stuff. If you needed to, you could take your knife and rough up the fibers a little bit. Whatever you need to do to break these fibers up to create more surface area. Something like that will take a spark, take an ember, you blow it into flame, you add something like that to it, and you're good to go. When you're out walking around, you want to look for this type of material. Now I'm going to go ahead and use my ferrocerium rod to ignite the char cloth, to ignite the rest of the tinder bundle, and blow it into flame. And now you have fire. You can use this fire to ignite the rest of your fire lay. Larger sticks, tinder, whatever you're using. Be careful with this, it is dangerous, but you want to practice this skill. It's not always entirely easy to do, but as you can see, it does burn. This is dry tinder, it's not wet marginal tinder. There's different techniques for the different materials that you're using. Regardless of the ignition source, you're going to basically construct your tinder bundle the same, ignite it pretty much the same, to get fire. Lighters are great, but they don't guarantee fire. Your normal lighter is pressurized. At certain altitudes, it's not going to work. If it gets wet, you're going to have a very hard time lighting something. When it's out of fuel, it's out of fuel. Your Zippo lighter, on the other hand, a little more windproof, but when it's out of fuel, you could add more fuel to it. The downfall of this, though, is the fuel does evaporate from inside here. A lighter like this, it has an O-ring seal, so the fuel is not going to evaporate on you. It's not wind resistant, so you have to be careful of that. It will blow out. But when it's out of fuel, you can add more. And it's not pressurized, so altitude's not going to be a problem. I've been carrying this lighter on me for about 6 months now every day. I filled it up once in the beginning of that 6 months, haven't filled it up since. I don't use it every day. I check it about every month or so to make sure it still lights, and obviously it still does. Matches are another indispensable thing you want to have in your bag or kit. Not all matches are the same. You have your normal matches, and don't forget your strike pad. Your strike anywhere matches are not like what they used to be, so anytime you include the matches that are not strike anywhere, definitely include the striker with it. Without that, you're going to have a lot harder time trying to get them to light. You can use a regular lighter to light them, especially if it's out of fuel. You can use the flint in there to help light the match. You can use a ferrocerium rod that takes a little work to get it to light. You can use a magnifying glass with the sun to get it to light. So if you don't have the striker, there are alternatives. Waterproofing your matches, you can dip the match in wax to help waterproof it. You can put the match inside a straw and melt the ends. We'll go over that later in a different video on an Altoid survival kit. Whatever you do, you want to have backups for your systems. You don't want to rely on one way to light a fire. The stormproof matches, they burn a lot longer. Those are going to be more beneficial when it comes to wet weather fires, winter fires, wet tinder, anything that's marginal and not completely dry and fluffy. Even when striking a match, you don't want to take the match and strike it like this, because the match could break right in the center. Something like that in a survival situation could be detrimental. You want to take the match, put your finger behind the head of the match, and strike towards you. Tip the match down a little bit to light the rest of it on fire, And now you can light your tinder. When using the ferrocerium rod, you don't want to push the striker towards your tinder bundle because you don't want to knock it out of the way. You want to pull the ferrocerium rod away from your striker, igniting your tinder. Char cloth can also be ignited with your ferrocerium rod, also with the sun and anything else that's going to spark. It ignites really easy. You can see it catches, and it's just going to glow into a nice ember. You blow onto it inside a tinder bundle and you'll have fire in no time. You can use the cotton ball Vaseline with marginal tinder. It'll light right up. That'll burn for a minute or two, giving your wet tinder a chance to dry out and start on fire. If you're using a ferro rod with a magnesium block, you want to scrape off the magnesium, create some shavings. Once you get some shavings, you can go ahead and use your ferro rod to ignite the shavings. Now the magnesium shavings burn a lot hotter than the ferro rod. You use the magnesium to light your tinder bundle. You use the ferro rod to light the magnesium. Now if you make your wood shavings thin enough, almost like paper, you use your magnesium shavings and your ferrocerium rod, you should be able to get it to ignite. Now your birch bark and your pine resin absolutely ignite. And I'm just using a small amount just to show you the example of how well they burn and how you can use this to help marginal tinder, your normal tinder bundle, burn up. Now that birch bark is actually old birch bark I found from a fallen tree. The tree was pretty much rotted away, but the birch bark itself, as you can see, still has enough oil in there to burn really nice. The pine resin, that pine resin came off of the tree. I reduced it down to filter it out, and I'll show that in a later video. That pine resin was left over and actually just had bark and junk and everything else in it, but it's still very usable. You want to look for birch and you want to look for pine. You want to check the pine tree for any type of big glob of pine resin that you can find, or even the smaller globs of pine resin, and that stuff will ignite very nice. Now when working with any type of combustible fuel, you don't want to pour it onto your tinder, onto your sticks or anything like that. You want to use the bottom of a pop can, use a tuna fish can. You could even dig a little hole in the ground and pour the fuel into there. What you're going to do is just pour the fuel in and then ignite it. You can use a ferrocerium rod. You can also use a lighter. You can also use a match to light the fuel. And then you put your tinder on top, and even wet marginal tinder you put on top. That will definitely help you ignite it and dry it out. When you do something like this and the fuel is contained, you don't have to worry about an explosion or a big burst of fuel. When you pour the fuel right onto the tinder, there's going to be a big combustion. That's when it gets dangerous. That's when it'll blow back onto you. It's going to burn you. It's going to be a bad situation, especially if you're in a survival situation. Something like this, it's much safer, especially if you're using any type of fuel and using like a car battery to ignite it. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give me a thumbs up and subscribe. Definitely tell your friends and share this video. And check out some of my other videos.